All right, here we are again at Temple Baptist Church in the Shiloh Sunday School class, and we're glad to be back with you all again. We're closing in on the end of the book of Ecclesiastes. Next week will be the last lesson in this, but for today we're in chapter 9, and we're going to look at some things that actually are just hard rock truth things that we all have to deal with in our life. That it's coming to all of us, and that is death. I mean, it's something that we all know. What the old saying is, nobody ever got out of this world alive, and so that's kind of what we're looking at. But Solomon, in his wisdom, in verse 1 there, he came up there and he says, "For all this," and he's been reiterating, he's been going over this for a chapter or two back now, and actually ever since in the end of chapter 7, chapter 8, and now here we are. He is talking about this and preparing these people that's in his class. If you remember, we talked about this, how that the last week, I think it was, we talked about the word preacher or teacher or ecclesia, the called out assembly, that he's actually teaching a class as he's doing this, and he's bringing these things up to make these people aware that they have this knowledge, this rhetorical knowledge that they're all going to die, but he's wanting to exhort them in their way to live until that time comes. And so that's where he's at. And he says here, "For all this I considered," or I thought, or I dwelt on this thing in my mind, and it's not just something that's just popped up and he's going to deal with it, but he said, "I've considered this." This word there is used 32 times in about 26 verses in the Bible, so it's an important word, but it tells us something, that as we think and we do, we move about in life, that we ought to not be haphazard, that we ought not be too quick to jump into things, to make decisions, to consider these things and look at them, what the New Testament says, circumspectly. Paul used that word a couple of different times, that we as New Testament Christians ought to look at decisions and things that we do from all directions, like we use the word circumference, that we might do that. And that's what Solomon is saying when he wrote this here. I looked at this thing from every direction. I considered in my heart. I thought and I dwelt on this before. He said, even to declare all this, or to announce this thing. He said, I have considered this in my heart, even to declare it, that the righteous and the wise and their works are in the hand of God. That the Bible tells us that over again in the New Testament, in the book of Romans, chapter 3, it's verse 10, I think it is. It says that there's none righteous, no, not one. And then it tells us there a little further down in that same chapter, it tells us that the wages of sin is death. And so, these things are not a good outcome. And it says that the righteous and the wise and their works are in the hand of God. God is sovereign in all things. But there's a thing there that we have no righteousness of our own. If we have any righteousness at all, it's because we're clothed in the righteousness of Jesus Christ. Other than that, we don't. He says here that the righteous and the wise and their works are in the hand of God. We see that in our life as we go, that God is sovereign, that He's the one that sets our ways. It tells us over in the book of Proverbs, chapter 21, verse 1, it says, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, as the rivers of water. He turneth it wherever He wants it to go. And it's not just the king's, but it's my heart and your heart. And God has a plan for our life, and He's working that plan out. It might be in ways that we don't understand, we don't see, that might even be attached to somebody else's the plan of their life, that God can have us in a place to do what He would have us to do. There's a thing there, again, that in that verse there it says, and all this that the righteous and the wise and the works are in the hand of God, no man knoweth either love or hatred by all this before them. These things, good things, bad things, they come to us all. There's an ebb and flow. We'll use that word later on some more here later. But there is an ebb and flow to life. And there's times when last week we talked about a time of prosperity and a time of adversity. And these things, they come to us all. And we don't understand why. And that's what that says right there. No man knoweth either love or hatred by all that is before them. We do not know what God has in store for us today or tomorrow, for that matter, even the rest of today. We just don't know. Things can turn in our life on a spindle, and we can be everything going good one minute and terrible the next, and we don't understand why. So I don't think sometimes it's meant that we should walk by faith, live by faith, and do those things, and that in doing that, God's will be done. We don't really have, well, to turn back, if I'll turn back over here into chapter 7, verse 14, and the last part of that, it says, God hath also set the one over against the other, to the end that man should find nothing after him. We have to trust. We have to walk in faith and trust God that He is going to do what is right. And so as we do that, we look at we just have to know that He will bring it all out to a good end when it's all said and done. Sometimes that's kind of hard because there in verse 2 it says, all things come alike to all. There is one event to the righteous and one to the wicked, to the good, to the unclean, to him that sacrifice and him that sacrifice not. As is the good, so is the sinner, and he that sweareth as he that feareth an oath. And that's a mouthful when you want to start digging that apart and tearing it apart. But this one thing that comes to all is death, and we will see that a little bit later on. This one event that comes to all, but it comes to the righteous, it comes to the wicked, to the good, to the unclean, to all those that sacrifice to Him, to the one that goes to church, the one that doesn't go to church. This thing we call death, is something that is going to come to all of us. It tells us, again, over in the New Testament, in the book of Hebrews and chapter 9 and verse 27, that's appointed unto man once to die, and then the judgment. And here, the here and now, before we come to that place, is when we have, I don't want to be flippant about it, but it's our prep time. If we're going to be saved, this is when it's going to have to happen, is in this life. And, but so, what about in the meantime? Are we going to live this righteous life? And if we're all going to die anyway, what's the difference? Well, the difference is that it's appointed unto man once to die, and then the judgment, and that is the difference. Sometimes, we have really bad things happen in our life, and it comes to all of us sooner or later. We have those kind of issues that come up, and we don't understand why. But God is purifying Him a church. He's purifying Him a people. And we have to go through hard times to appreciate the good times. And as we grow in what the Scriptures call the nurture and the admonition of the Lord, we have to do that. We talk about these things that, and I can't quote the verse, I probably ought to be able to, but over in Romans 8:28, it says that all things work together for good to them that are called, to those that are called according to His purpose. And so I probably butchered that up, but it's pretty close, and you should get the idea of what that means. In your lesson book, it says, it asks a question, and it's a relevant question, and it's worth paying a little attention to. It says, why are people, unbelievers and believers alike, reluctant to think about their mortality and what they should do properly to prepare for death? Now, I've talked to people, I'm sure you guys in the class have too, that people say, well, I lead a good life. I've never done anybody any intentional harm, and they think that that's good. That's good enough. Well, being just a good person is not enough. That's not what it takes to be saved. Many people just will not deal with this thing in their own life that they're going to die someday. People just refuse to acknowledge the fact that, yes, it's going to come, and they want to place their trust. Well, maybe the Lord will come back. Well, maybe He won't. I don't see, I don't know. I'm not going to say that I don't see it happening. I see a lot of things in line to where it could happen. And so I don't know, and it's not my place to know. But I do know that He is coming one of these days, and that everybody in this room, needs to be ready for that day. And that does not mean just because you do good works somewhere that you are going to be declared righteous before God, because you will not be, short of being clothed in the righteousness of Jesus Christ. And so we could talk about that at a later time if you want to. There's another thing there. Well, to go down there in verse 3, it says, this is an evil among all things that are done under the sun. And that's talking about death. It's an evil thing. You know, before the fall in the garden, there was no such thing as death. And it's a thing that because of the fall, it came, and it's came to all generations ever since then. But Solomon calls that an evil thing that is done under the sun. It's a worldwide thing. It's not just to us or to those, say, in Africa or Europe. It's to all humanity that's affected by that fall in the garden. It says there's one event that happens unto all. And then he goes on and he says, yea, also the hearts of the sons of men are full of evil, and madness is in their hearts while they live. And after that, they go to the dead. People die. And in fact, over in the book of Jeremiah, I had that marked, but I've lost it somewhere. But anyway, it says the heart is desperately wicked, and who can know it? That's pretty much a quote of that one verse over there. But yet, without Jesus, without the Holy Spirit within our hearts to seal our hearts, our ways are that we run to the bad things. Sin is a natural thing until we get saved, and then it becomes unnatural, and we don't want to be a part of that anymore. And that's part of that righteousness. But this evil thing that it says is that it calls death, that are done under the sun, this one event. And he says the heart of the sons of men are full of evil and madness in their heart while they live. I've never seen a time in my life, I don't think any of y'all have either, where life seems to be so wicked in every way. The things that you see on TV, the things that you hear on the news, the whole world, my wife mentioned it just this morning, that the whole world seems to have gone nuts. Even the geography of the world, fires and storms and floods, and seen, I think this morning on the news I saw where there was 3 volcanoes erupting all at the same time, and they was talking about how very unusual that was. So the world is groaning in travail. It says that again over, I think it's in the book of Matthew, where it talks about that. Excuse me. But anyway, for the believer, death is but a bridge. It's just, what the Bible says, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. Paul said that in a couple of different places. But the death, the process of dying, I think is what we fear more than death itself for the Christian, because you never know how that is going to come. It might be a fast thing that we don't know. That's what everybody wants to die at home in bed in their sleep, but sadly it just does not happen like that very often. But anyway, the world, it says the sin's effect is madness, and for this reason men's sinful action in a fallen and a chaotic world are an enigma to human reason or logic. And that's some fancier words to say we just don't understand it. We just don't understand why life is like that, why it is the way it is, and why it's so convoluted. It comes and it goes, this ebb and flow of things, and it keeps us confused all the time. But then, okay, let's go on and let's talk about something else then. In verse 4, it says, "For to him that is joined to all the living, there is hope." And then he has a colon there, and that colon, those two little dots say, I'm going to add something to this. It says, "For a living dog is better than a dead lion." And so, for him that is still alive, there's hope. And from what he said in these first three verses, hope for what? What do we have to look forward to? More of the same stuff? Is it going to be better? Is it going to be worse? Sad to say, it's probably going to be worse, not trying to be that discouraging. But yet, while we are alive, there's hope. I don't remember the statistics anymore, but as a person gets older, there's less and less chance as they become more set in their ways, and I'm going to do it my way, as Frank Sinatra said in his song, that the heart gets calloused, it gets harder, and it's harder for those seeds of conviction from the Holy Spirit to get into their hearts and to make them realize that they're lost and something has to be done, or they're going to die and go to a hell, for a place that was not made for them, and an awful place like that. And they have this hope. When he said for a living dog, in the culture of that day, that was about the ultimate insult there. It says a living dog is better than a dead lion. Once that lion, he could eat that dog alive when he was alive, but now that he's dead, he's just a chunk of meat, and he's not going to ever do anything ever again. While yet the living dog, he may have some opportunity to hunt, to turn into a good dog, if we'd want to put it that way. But he says there in verse 5, "For the living know that they shall die, but the dead don't know anything. Neither have they any more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. Also their love and their hatred and their envy is now perished. Neither have they any more portion forever in anything that is done under the sun." Understanding that Solomon in his day, he did not have the kind of understanding that we have of Jesus, of the coming Messiah. There is some places in there where he acknowledges that there's a judgment coming. So he understands there's a little bit of an afterlife. But as far as the here and now, as far as he's concerned, right there, or even us now, he said, "For the living know that they shall die." That's a given. It's gonna happen to us all. And the dead, they don't know anything, neither do they have any reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. You go out here in the city cemetery, and there's thousands and thousands of tombstones out there in that cemetery, but nobody knows who they all are. I know where my parents are buried. My brother's buried there. Izetta's sisters are buried there. Some of them are. But as far as that goes, we know nobody else knows or really cares where that's at. But their opportunities to do anything is gone. There's nothing else that's ever going to be there, except that for us and the immediate family, there's a memory, maybe a few other people, and then another generation, that'll be gone. It's over. It says all the things that they cared about, the people that they loved, their hatred, their envy, their jealousy, it's all gone. Neither have they any more portion forever in anything that is done. We have. I am amazed at life. I see on the highway or even out here in our own church parking lot, the cracks in the parking lot. There's weeds trying to come up through that garden. You go over on Current River or go back up in the hills and find a cliff, and there's a tree growing out there, and it don't look like there's enough topsoil to even hold the tree up, but yet it's growing there. And we are the same way. We have this built-in amazing will to live, and we want to live, and all that's good. God instituted that in us, in our DNA, because we would have died out a long time ago if we did not have a strong will to live. But yet there comes a point in time that Solomon says that it's vanity. He calls life down in verse 9. He says that it's fleeting. Most of the time we define that word vanity as meaningless or useless, and it means that too. But it also means, in some ways, sometimes it's interpreted as quick. Quick, it's fleeting. It's here today. It's gone tomorrow. It's a vapor, and that's how fast it is. So are we going to be prepared for the day when it ends? And that's what he is really getting at. I'm going to have to hurry up here, but he said there, we have that choice, but that time is going to go away. He tells us, if you might remember back over when we first started, or in chapter 3, it says there's a time for every season, verses 1 and 2 there, and he says there's a time to be born and a time to die. This is set in God's time, God's way of doing things, and those times are set, and we have to make the best of it. So what? We've said all that. We talked here for 20-some minutes about this. So anyway, Solomon's end of this, his mindset that, well, what do we do? Knowing those things about death is coming, there's a season for us to live, to do good, to die, to do all these things, so what? So he says in verse 9, back up to verse 7, he says, go your way, or while you're alive, and while you're living life, eat thy bread with joy, drink thy wine with a merry heart, for God now accepteth thy works. God knows what's going on here. He does not want us to be downbeat, to be discouraged all the time. The things that happen, they just happen, and they're going to happen, good and bad, and he tells us to walk by faith and live in those things. He says, let thy garments always be white, and that is another way of, an Old Testament way of saying, live right, do right, let thy head lack no ointment. And I had a lot I really wanted to say about that, but I don't have the time to go on with that. But he says, live joyfully with the wife whom thou lovest all the days of thy vanity, which he hath given thee under the sun. And that's an important thing, and we'll not lose track of it, of where those blessings come from. They didn't just happen, the things that's happened in your life, good and bad, but the good things they didn't just happen out of the clear blue sky by coincidence or circumstances. These things are ordained by God. And that's what it says there in verse 9, that they are gifts from God. And, it says, God has given thee under the sun all the days of thy vanity, and those fleeting short life, for that is a portion in this life, and in thy labor which thou takest under the sun. And then he says, whatever you do, do it with all thy might. Do it to the best of your ability, to the best that you can, and in the end, God will bless that. And so anyway, I'm going to have to quit and go on. See you next week. We'll look at chapter 12 at the end of this, And I appreciate all your views. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next week.